So my name is Nicolas Chabot. You can follow me here on Twitter or the company at Traackr. And basically what we do is we help brands and agencies in their influencer marketing strategies. We help them identify top people and execute their strategy. Traackr is available now. We track English content, French content, German content, and actually today we're glad to announce that we're going to track Spanish content. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a statistician, so I'm more from a marketing background, but really I think influencer marketing is interesting to talk about in the context of big data, because it's really one of the interesting applications of how do you bring actionable insights from big data. I think Eric Schmidt of Google shared a few months ago in a conference that 97% of the content that is created today on the web is social content. And ironically, he added that Google is very good at searching the remaining 3%. So there is definitely a big challenge for anyone to make sense out of that huge amount of data that is the social data. And the view that influencer marketing is taking is that to have access to the most important, to the relevant content, you need to understand who are the people behind it. All right? So it's trying to index and understand content through the people who are the authors of the content, and trying to find the people in the noise. But not everyone, who are the key sources of information? Who are the people that actually are driving social impact through the content, through the conversation that they animate, the content they publish, the original ideas that they put through on the web? The theory behind that, and I'm not going to go into the Duncan versus Watts debate on how influence is structured online and the dynamics of networks, but what we find, and that's a key foundation, and when we look at the data Traackr, is that 3% of the people drive 90% of the impact. And what is surprising is that this number is actually extremely consistent across any type of community or problem that you are looking at. Now, so you would argue that would be more on the Duncan side. So there is a tipping point, or there are some key people who can drive influence or drive impact. The thing is that these 3 people change according to context. So it's not like you have 3% of the people that drive impact across any kind of topic. When you look at different topics, these 3% of individuals are very different, are specific. And actually when we do searches, even on closely related topics like hybrid cars, technology in cars, design in cars, you actually find that the people who drive impact in those conversations are different people. So yes, you do have key people who drive impact, but these people have impact in very specific conversations. Now, we've started to talk about maybe the foundations of what is influencer marketing, but really what it's about is about generating impact to a specific audience using the social capital of specific individuals. So the real specificity of this influencer marketing is that it's not about broadcasting a message to as many people as possible and trying to hit your target. It's defining specific contents and using specific channels to target your audience and using their authority to maximize your impact. Let's just get one step back, because we know there's a lot of debate about what is influence, about the word influence. Is it really used the way it should be used? And here I'm using a quote by Philip Sheldrake, who some of you might know is a British expert of influence. He actually wrote this book about the business of influence. And the definition that he uses, he says, you have been influenced when you think something that you wouldn't otherwise have thought, or do something that you wouldn't otherwise have done. Now, the interesting thing about that is that what it means is that you can only see influence after it's happened. Each of you to actually try to answer these questions in your head, which movies did you last see at the cinema? Why did you attend this conference? Who did you vote for the last election? All right? If you have these questions in your head, can you decide, can you identify who actually influenced you? Why did you go and see that movie? Did someone talk to you about it? Did you see something on television? Did you read about it? Did your wife want to see it? What happened? Why did you go and see that movie? And same with the other questions, why did you go to that conference? What enticed you to come here? Why did you vote in a way rather than another one? And probably when you start to think about this, you realize that influence is very complex. Okay, so there's not just one unique factor that actually drives influence. It's like, if you try to answer that question about a traffic jam, which car started it? Very simple question, but very complex answer. How do you measure that? Does it make sense to measure that influence? So this influence measurement thing, does it have sense? Especially since really what you want is to measure influence before it happens. That's what communication people want. They want to know who is influential or who has influence before it actually has taken place. So, it's already difficult to understand after it's taken place. So, understanding influence before it has taken place seems to be really impossible. So really, if we want to be realistic, what we're saying here is that we're going to try to measure which individuals are in the best position to exert influence on a specific topic. Now, the reality of that influence is not dependent just on the position in which these people sit. It will depend about the content that they publish, about how convincing they are in their storytelling, all right? So the influence will come from the overall campaign or the overall content that these people actually publish. So let's try to focus about this question, which is, can we identify on the social web the people who are in the best position to exert an influence? Well, one thing is sure, is influence cannot be measured by a single score. And here is the example of Pierre-Philippe Commaret. He's a famous influencer on digital marketing. And, he's got a lot of medals. He's like, he's like in the 1% of profiles, most views of LinkedIn. He's got credit scores, cloud scores, anything you want, he has it. But when you ask him whether, he says, but do you have influence? He said, well, all this doesn't mean I do have influence. Having influence, what does it mean? It's, I'm popular. That's what it means. It means I'm popular. But if he talks about, Vietnamese cooking, nobody cares about him. He's just on digital marketing. He's a popular person. Someone called Brian Solis, who is a consultant at the Altimeter Group, and also a respected figure on social media and social media influence, suggested a methodology that will be based on these three criteria, which are reach, resonance, and relevance. Reach would be a measure on the size of the audience that you're reaching out to. Resonance would be a measure of the engagement of that audience. So how do they react to the content that that person is publishing? And really, and I think this is really the key to that, the third pillar is relevance. So how much authority has that individual in that specific topic? Because it's by having that specific authority that it actually can probably change people's behavior on that specific topic. All right? Very interestingly, when Brian Solis published that, it was 1 year ago, we really liked it because it was exactly using the methodology that we're using as well in Traackr. So for the purpose of this conference, what we did is work on a list of all of the top people on digital marketing in Spanish. So I don't know if any one of you, is there anyone here that is part of that list? The full list, I've tweeted this morning, the full list, so you can have a look and see whether you're on there, and complain to me if you're not. There is a way, we've seen a bit of a theoretical background about what influencer marketing is, how do we actually try to measure influence or potential influence. Now let's try to think about what are the use cases for brands. And there are many use cases for this information. Some of it is gaining social insights from the key experts on the market. Some of it will be reputation, to manage your voice and your presence, your corporate presence on social. But I think really the most critical one for brands is that influencer marketing is advocacy marketing. When you ask customers who they trust most for their purchasing decisions, the first thing they mention is the people they know, so like your friend, your girlfriend, your mother, your friends, and that's always been the case, that like word of mouth marketing, the people you know, okay? It's a limited number of people because you have to sort of physically know them, be in touch with them. Now, what is new here is that just right behind that, the second biggest factor of influence that people recognize on their purchasing decision is online content. Social content, brand content, editorial content, everything online. That's really an important information to have. Now, some might argue influencer marketing has always existed. Celebrity marketing is somehow influencer marketing, we either want to be George Clooney having coffee or want to be sitting next to George Clooney having coffee, maybe depending on your sex. But it's also taking a new shape, and it's become like mass influence. We've talked about the Netflix recommendation program, TripAdvisor, customer reviews are, really elements of social influence. Now, I don't know if any one of you have heard about this experience, which is very interesting. This is a fashion CMA store in Brazil. They're trying to bring social data into the store, and basically they're putting on every hanger, on every piece of clothes, the number of likes that this piece of clothes has got, and they consider that this might be quite a helpful information for people in the shop when they want to help and select the clothes they want to wear. So how this social influence actually come into the real world. Is that an interesting experience? This influence is also now, that's a new thing in the hands of some of the key experts. And that's new because these people, they come sometimes from nowhere. They've built their own presence, they've built their own media through their blogs. This is a picture of David L. Jones. He's one of the first bloggers that sort of emerged from the blogosphere, and he talks about electronics products and these kind of things, and he's still there, there. And you can see individuals that have just surfaced from really just like, the general crowd really, not celebrities having an influence. So how does that influence work for the customer and in the customer journey? And again, Brian Solis published a few months ago a new piece on influence, and he tried to structure this influence loop, saying, when you start to become aware of a product, you're going to start considering it, you're going to start evaluating the product. So that's the first element of influence before you purchase the product. And then the second element, which is, what is your experience? How are you going to become an advocate of the product? How are you going to share that online? Now, I like that, but I think if you go a bit further in the thinking, you can identify two key moments where influence is absolutely strategic for brands. And these two key moments are the POMI and the Z-mode. The POMI is at the point of market entry. It's a concept that was developed by Procter & Gamble in the 80s. So it's not a new social media concept. It's like a 25 years old marketing or 30 years old marketing concept. And the concept of POMI is to say that there are specific moments where customers enter your market. And the typical example is a pregnant woman. And if you sell baby food or baby diapers, the point where women become pregnant is the point where they potentially enter your market. Before that, they were not interested, they were not customers, they were not aware. They become pregnant, boom, they enter your market. And a lot of markets are just specific points of entry if you start thinking about it. So at which point do individuals become targets or become potential customers? And it's a very important moment because it's a moment where probably the customer will create his first interaction with your brand. So it's a key moment to influence him, to make him aware of what you do and what you stand for. So POMI is the first key moment of influence for brands. The second one is the Z mode. And the Z mode is an extension of another concept developed by Procter & Gamble, which is the first moment of truth. The first moment of truth is when people are on the shelves and selling their product. And the second moment of truth is when they're at home, they experience it. Okay, that's the original concept. Now that concept has been expanded, and Google has been fairly instrumental in that reflection as well. And researchers have sort of conceptualized this zero moment of truth, which is what happens actually before people select their product on the shelves. And what is very important to us in this room, that this zero moment of truth, this specific moment, is very, very digital. People go online, they research, they look at customer reviews, they talk to their peers, they watch videos. I mean, in some product categories, this zero moment of truth has taken a huge space. Like if you talk about consumer electronics, more than 80% of customers prepare their purchase online. So when they go to the store, most of them actually already know what they want to purchase. So this zero moment of truth is the second really key point of interaction that brands need to build with their customers. So now I've tried to explain why this influencer marketing is absolutely strategic for brands. Now, there is one problem. The problem is that this influencer marketing is very difficult to buy. You know, you cannot go to a platform and say, you know, I'm going to put $2 million and, you know, I'm going to buy influence. It doesn't work like that. It's not like you're going to Facebook and buying Facebook ads or Google ads, or, you know, it doesn't work like that. Because, you know, it's about engaging with people and using people's sort of social authority. So it's difficult to execute. So let's have a look at, you know, the 4 challenges that brands face when they start to execute. The first one, which seems easy but actually proves to be also a first challenge, is how do I define the community that I want to engage with, that I'm targeting? I've distinguished here 3 different strategies or levels, maybe levels of sophistication. The first one is starting to identify people who talk about my brand. And sometimes actually recently, 2 weeks ago, I met a huge airline and they say, oh no, don't worry about us. I know my influencers. Well, you know your influencers. What does that mean? You know, I know them, they talk about us all the time, they tweet about us all the time. Yeah. Oh, you mean your super fans? You know, people who are, you know, they really like you, they talk a lot about you, and they're your advocates, and that's great. And these people are easy to find. They're on your Facebook page, they're on your Twitter feed, they talk about you all the time. They're easy to find, and, you know, looking after them is absolutely key. But, you know, whether they are the only kind of people that you need to look after is another question. Now, the second level, which is also fairly, I think, direct for brands to understand, is try to look for people who are potentially influential in their market sector. So if I am Sony, I need to have a working relationship with the key influencers in television, in digital cameras. I need to have that relationship, and I need to be able to, you know, to publish content through them and to keep them informed. And I think that's a very natural thing to understand for brands, and I think that's quite easy to relate that to some sales target or advocacy elements. And you find these people because you're going to look for people who talk about your product category, about you, about your competitors. Now, very interestingly, there's also a third way to target your audience, which I think is really the highest potential for brands, is instead of talking about you, about your product, let's start to think about who your customers are and what are they interested in, okay? And start to target them based on their center of interest. A good example of that I'd like to share is a famous British beer, and they had a project. They wanted to make drinking beer a cool thing to do for young women. right? So they had this old project, this new product, and they wanted to make it like a cool drink. So do you think that it would make sense for them to target people who are influential in beer? It doesn't make sense because their audience target doesn't follow these people. They don't drink beer at the moment. They want to develop a new market. So what they did is they tried to identify people who are active in the space of going out, entertainment, and even fashion, okay, and started to engage and create content for that community because this is the target that they wanted to look at. Another example that is interesting is a campaign that was run by Levi's last year. Interesting as well how they integrated within their overall marketing plan. They say, I don't want to talk to the same old-fashioned bloggers that know about us. I don't have much to tell about fashion with my jeans, but I would like to engage with other communities that are going to bring to my brands some very interesting values, about how practical it is, how cool it is, blah, blah. And they engage with the urban cycling community. So who is actually influential in urban cycling? And they started to talk about fashion with these people. And it's interesting because these people do not expect to be engaged by Levi's. So because it was new for them, it was bringing new content, it was very successful and people really engaged with that. So interesting to see how you define your community based on what you want to achieve. Now the second challenge, once you've identified the kind of people that you're targeting, is to find them. No, Justin Bieber is not always the person you want to talk to, all right? I mean, if you sell corporate insurance, Justin Bieber will be, no help to you, even if he has the best cloud score you can have. Good illustration as well is from one of our customers in the cloud computing space, and they run this advocacy program, and they engage with these three guys here. You might know maybe one of them. Mr. Chabot is a famous blogger. He talks about electronics. He's a very well-known figure because he's a B2C figure, talk a lot about consumer products. And if you have a consumer product, you really want to be reviewed by him. So they engage with them, but they also engage with Jason Fall, who is the moustache and the beard. And you can see he has a good following as well, but he's not very well known by the general public because he's more on the B2B side. On the nature of the product, you can actually trace your traffic back to one or the other. It was a very interesting use case. And what they found is that Robert Scoble was able to drive a huge amount of traffic on our client's website, but very low sales. A lot of visitors, no transformation. On the other hand, Jason Falls, because he's probably very much in the right space, was able to drive a 10% increase in sales during the time of the period. So the conclusion is, what do you want to achieve? If you want to achieve traffic, or if you want to achieve sales, maybe different people you need to talk to. You've got to understand your influencers, understand who they are. I mean, we published some time ago, I don't think that's very easy to read, but there is more detail on our website. All influencers are not the same. They have different behaviors, they have different strengths, and they will drive different impact for you and for your brand. Understand how they're connected online. Who are the closest connections? Who do they talk to? Who are they engaged with? How does influence content flows within that community? Where are they located? And that's based on our digital marketing list in Spanish. So you can see actually quite a few people based in the Americas as well, publishing interesting content in Spanish. Basically, you've got to know, your influencers. You've got to know them because the real tough question is the question that almost I get all the time is, all right, we've got the leads, we know them, we've identified them now. How do we engage with them? Do I call? What do I do? And actually, when you talk to the experts about engagement, they all tell you the same thing at the end. You have to think about mutually beneficial relationships. Think about them and think about how you can help these people achieve their objectives. And here this illustration is a work that was done by Lee Oden. Lee Oden is like the king of content marketing. He's based in Minnesota, and he was asked to do some work around digital marketing, and he had a great idea. He said, well, I'm going to ask each of them to give their best tip about digital marketing, and he produced this book about it. And people really loved it because they wanted to be recognized as being part of that community. They wanted to be recognized as the expert and to be part of that overall project. And people really enjoyed, talking to each other. So that worked very well because, these big influencers on digital marketing were really happy to take part in the project. Another interesting trend, one of our clients in the UK, Vicky Charney, actually shared that in one of our blog posts on how to engage customers. And she said, really what I'm trying to do is to move towards the path of co-creation. So the idea being, if you go to your influencers with some pre-packaged content, they get solicitations all day long. But if you come to them with a specific project that you're going to create something new and original together, you're going to buy them in, and they're going to bring their expertise, they're going to bring their time, and they're going to bring their community with them. And the kind of co-creation that I'm thinking about is, if you're in the fashion world, why don't we co-create a collection together, 2 or 3 items? If you're, let's say you're Xperia, how do we produce video content together, and how do I help these people produce some quality content with a bit of, production budget? So, how do you do things together to produce original content and engage their community? And at the end of the day, remember the objective that you're having is to turn the potential influence of these people into actual positive impact for you. You haven't really finished because there's always someone that comes in and says, oh, what is the ROI of all this? And this famous ROI question. Well, it's the same as any marketing or communication activity, really. And if you don't have a framework to measure that, there is one that I suggest where there are probably 3 different steps of KPIs you need to measure up: the activity, the output, the outcome. The activity is, how do I put measurements that enable me to build up my campaigns? So if you're on paid media, you're going to look at the distribution of your magazine, you're going to look at how many viewers of this TV show, the social demographics of people watching that show. Owned media, your own website, you're going to look at how many fans do you have on the web page. You're actually going to work to increase that number of fans. Transformation rate, what is my SEO ranking? And influence media, you will look at popularity, relevance, advocacy, to select and just identify the right media for you. Now, each of these will deliver different outputs. Paid media will deliver quick, click-through impressions. Through your Facebook page, you're going to deliver shares and likes. And your influence media, you're going to gain share of voice, advocacy in the influencers. But really, at the end of the day, what you're really interested in is the outcome. And the outcome is the same, probably across all the different medias. And it depends on your campaign, depends on your objective. It could be leads, sales, awareness, reputation, etc. What I'm saying about the ROI question is decide what you want to measure. What is your objective? All right? Measure what matters to you. And if you ask yourself the question at the end of the campaign, it's not a good way to go about it. Start with your objective and measure whether you've achieved that objective. So, and that's the way it works for any activity that you will do. Now, just as a conclusion, I would just like to share my view about what is the future of influencer marketing with you. And I will make 2 points. The first one is that I believe that influencer marketing will be increasingly integrated by brands in their overall communication strategy. Today, in North America, 75% of the marketing budget goes to traditional media. The trend is slightly decreasing, mainly because of the press. And online advertising display is increasing. People always keep investing in their own website, in their own assets, in their search position. But really, the rising sort of marketing channels are social media channels, and within that, influencer marketing. What I'm saying is that whilst too often, sometimes it's like in the hands of the PR department or the reputation department, fairly isolated, these times will come to an end, and this influencer activity will really be considered as an integral part of people's communication strategy. And the second trend is that technology will play an increasing part in that. The Boston Consulting Group published last week a very interesting study about the inefficiencies in communication agencies due to the complexity of digital marketing. Too many platforms, too much data, and they just basically lost and spending a huge amount of time and money just in trying to make sense of all that information that they get. And they estimate that there's a benefit of up to 33% in cost savings for agency from using unified technology to make their decision. Well, the same will apply to influencer marketing. Whilst sometimes it's been done manually, maybe very traditionally, like it was done with journalists in the past, the time has come where brands will want to industrialize their practice. They will want to have unified metrics and unified measures to their influencer marketing activities. And technology will be there to support them. I'm finishing with this. Thank you very much.